Get out, now!
The first thing I felt was the wind, not the argument, not his hand. The wind, cold and sharp and wrong, rushing into the car from a door that should have been closed. And then the road came up and took me. I need you to understand something before I tell you the rest of this story. I did not get into Morris's car because I was weak. I did not get into his car because I had forgotten what he was. I got into that car because he said our daughter's name. That is what he knew. That is what he used. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I was at work, third floor, back office, finishing a client report I had been staring at for 2 hours. My phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. I almost let it go to voicemail. Something made me answer. His voice hit me before I could process the number. Low, careful, already in the tone he uses when he needs something from me.
Don't even think about hanging up. I just got a call from Erica's school. She fell down a staircase. She's not responding. They need both parents there right now. I'm outside your building. Come down.
I told him I was hanging up. He said don't. He said it had nothing to do with us. He said he just got a call from Erica's school. He said she fell down a staircase. He said she was unresponsive. He said they needed both parents there immediately. I was already standing up before he finished the sentence. I want to tell you I questioned it. I want to tell you something in me paused and measured the odds. But Erica's name in the same sentence as unresponsive does not leave room for logic. My body just moved. I grabbed my bag, told my coworker I had a family emergency, and I was in the elevator before I remembered I hadn't grabbed my jacket. Security had turned him away at the front entrance earlier that day. He had been waiting outside the building the entire time, parked at the curb with his hazards off and his engine running. When I pushed through the front doors, he was already waving me over. He said there was no time to wait for a cab. He said every minute mattered. He said get in. I got in. We drove for 20 minutes. I spent all 20 of them trying to reach the school's main office. The line rang out twice. I found the principal's direct number in an old email thread and called that too. No answer. I was drafting a message to Jay to meet me at the school when Maurice started talking. Not about Erica. About me leaving. About how I had packed up his daughter and run to my auntie's place like he was some kind of monster. About how I thought I was so smart. About how I really believed I could just walk away from him without consequences. I stopped typing and stared out the window. He was still talking. I said, "Pull over, Maurice." He laughed, and I knew immediately that the laugh meant we were already somewhere past the point of pulling over. Before I tell you what happened next, look at this video. If you're watching this right now and you have ever prayed for someone to step in at someone's lowest moment, like this video, subscribe, and drop your location and time in the comments right now. Because one car was about to speed away, and another car, driven by someone you are not ready for, was already slowing down. Maurice went quiet after the laugh. That was the part that should have scared me most, and somehow always did. Maurice loud was something I had learned to navigate. Maurice quiet was a door closing. And once that door closed, I had maybe 30 seconds before whatever was behind it came through. He was doing 70 on the expressway, weaving, not recklessly, deliberately. The way a man drives when he is burning through something inside himself, and the speed is the only place it can go. I kept my eyes on my phone. I found the school's emergency contact line and was pressing call when his hand came across my body. Not for me, for the door handle. My brain registered it a full second after his fingers found it. That fraction of a moment where your mind refuses what your eyes are showing it. I grabbed the dashboard. I grabbed the edge of my seat. I said his name once, sharp, and then the door swung open and the wind came in and his palm was flat against my shoulder and I was gone. The expressway took me at 60 miles per hour. My right shoulder hit first. The impact was so complete that for one strange second I felt absolutely nothing. Just a massive, total pressure, like the road had decided to become part of my body. Then my hip. Then my palm. Then the skin on my right side began to understand what had just happened, and it screamed all at once, shoulder to knee, one long continuous burning that told me I was alive, because dead things don't feel like that. I skidded. Stopped. The world was on its side. A horn blasted somewhere behind me, long and desperate, the sound of a driver who nearly became something they could never recover from. Tires screamed to my left. I did not look. I pulled myself toward the white shoulder line on pure instinct, dragging my right side across the gravel strip, not stopping until the active lanes were behind me. Morris's car did not slow down. Not once. Not a tap. His taillights disappeared into the traffic ahead like I had never been in that seat. Like I was nothing he needed to account for. I sat up. The sky was too bright. The air felt thin in a way I could not explain. I pressed my hand against my hip and I breathed and I thought, he just tried to kill me. Not in the way people use that phrase after a bad night. In the exact, literal, physical way. I could be under those tires right now. I did not scream. Then I heard something I was not expecting. A car door. Not the sound of someone speeding past. The measured, deliberate sound of an engine cutting and a door opening with weight behind it. I turned my head. A black vehicle was on the shoulder, 30 feet back, and the man stepping out of it, tall, dark clothes, completely unhurried, was already rolling up his sleeve. I want to be honest with you about something. In the seconds after I hit that road, while I was still pulling myself across the gravel with my right side on fire and the highway noise filling up every corner of my head, I was not thinking about being rescued. I was thinking about Erica. I was thinking about whether she was actually at that school right now eating lunch and laughing with her friends while I was bleeding on an expressway because I believed her father. That thought hurt worse than the asphalt did. So when I heard that car door, when I turned my head and saw that black vehicle sitting on the shoulder with its engine cut and a man stepping out like he had all the time in the world, my first reaction was not relief. It was suspicion, because I had just been hurt by a man who approached me calmly too. He was tall, dark shirt, dark trousers, the kind of clothes that don't belong to a Tuesday afternoon on a highway. His left sleeve was already rolled up to the elbow, and as he stepped away from the vehicle and started walking toward me, he was rolling up the right one. Slowly, like he was organizing himself for something specific, like his hands needed to be ready and he was making sure they were. I put my palm up. I'm fine. He kept walking. I said I'm fine. I tried to stand and made it halfway before my right leg decided it had a different opinion. I grabbed at the air, found nothing, and stayed crouched in the gravel like my body was making a point I didn't want to hear. He crouched down to my level. He didn't reach for me. He didn't make the face people make when they're deciding whether you're worth the trouble. He just looked at me, directly, quietly, like he was reading something. Your shoulder is bleeding, he said. I know. Your hand too. I know. He stayed crouched. Can you stand? I just need a second. He gave me the second. He didn't fill it with words. He didn't look around at the traffic or check his phone or perform any kind of impatience. He simply waited, and something about that, the complete absence of urgency in a man who had just watched another man throw a woman from a moving car, made the back of my neck go still in a way I couldn't name. I got to my feet. My hip screamed. I locked my jaw and stood anyway. He stood when I stood. Then he turned slightly toward his vehicle and made one gesture. 2 fingers, low and clean, and a second man stepped out from the back seat. Broad shoulders, quiet eyes. He moved without being told twice. Get her into the car, the tall man said. I started to object. He looked at me, not past me, not through me, at me. You're on a highway. You're injured. And the man who put you here is still driving. He paused. My associate will see to your comfort. I'll be right back. I stopped arguing. I don't fully know why. Maybe it was the way he said it. Not like a request, and not quite like a command. Like a fact he was simply making me aware of. I got into the car, and he walked back toward the road. If you've ever watched someone get left on the side of the road and wondered who stops, and who doesn't, subscribe right now and drop your location and time in the comments. Because the man walking back toward that highway was not what anyone on that road was expecting. The inside of that car smelled clean. Cool air. Leather seats. Nothing that matched where I had just come from. The broad, quiet man guided me into the back seat with a carefulness that felt deliberate, like he had been told to be gentle and had understood exactly why. He handed me something to press against my shoulder without being asked. He didn't speak beyond what was necessary. He didn't stare. He simply made sure I was in, made sure I was upright, and then positioned himself where he could watch both me and the road without making either feel supervised. I pressed my back against the seat and looked out the window. The tall man, I still didn't know his name, was standing near the road's edge with a phone at his ear. He spoke into it briefly. Then he was back in the driver's seat and the vehicle was moving. I watched the highway through the glass and tried to understand what I was inside. Maurice thought he had driven away clean. I know that now. I know the exact shape of what he believed in those minutes after he accelerated, that he had made a problem disappear, that the highway had swallowed it, that whatever came next, he had bought himself time and distance and the particular kind of confidence that comes from hurting someone and facing no immediate consequence. He did not know that 2 vehicles were already ahead of him. He did not know that the road he was racing down had already been read. Entry points, exit options, the 2 most likely routes he would take based on where his ego would tell him to go. He didn't know any of that because he had spent the last 20 minutes focused entirely on me. He had not looked at the black car in the adjacent lane, had not registered it, had not considered for 1 second that pulling over on that highway would cost him anything. By the time Maurice realized the cars around him were not random, it was already over. The road had closed. I didn't see it happen. I want to be clear about that, because what I'm about to tell you was pieced together over the following days from what I was told, And from what I eventually stopped pretending I didn't already know. I was in the back seat of that car with a cloth pressed to my shoulder and my eyes fixed on nothing when it happened out there on that expressway. But I know exactly how it went. Maurice tried to accelerate first. That was his instinct. More speed, more distance, more of the same logic that had been failing him for years. When the vehicle in front of him slowed deliberately, he cut right. When the car on his right held its position and matched his speed without flinching, he braked hard. He was looking for a gap that didn't exist because it had never been left open for him. There was nowhere to go. The tall man stepped out of his car the same way he had stepped out on that shoulder. Unhurried, decided, already past the part where he was figuring out what to do. He walked to Maurice's driver's side door. Maurice was still trying to reverse when the door came open from the outside. Not Maurice opening it. The man opening it like it belonged to him. One punch. Not rage. Not performance. The kind of punch that knows exactly how much force the moment requires and refuses to use a single ounce beyond it. Maurice folded. He was lifted from the seat by his collar and placed on the asphalt in one motion. And then the man stood over him and waited. The sirens arrived exactly when they should have. And Maurice, the man who had thrown me from a moving car and driven away without checking his mirror once, was on the ground in handcuffs on the same expressway where he had left me bleeding in the gravel. The road that he thought had swallowed his problem gave it right back to him. If that gave you chills, you're not alone. Subscribe, hit the notification bell, and drop a comment below. Do you think what he did to Maurice was justified, or did he go too far? I need to see what you think, because what happens next changes everything. He agreed to take me to the school. I don't know what I expected him to say when I asked. I was still in the back seat, shoulder bandaged with whatever his associate had handed me, trying to hold myself together with both hands while the reality of the last 40 minutes sat on my chest like dead weight. I told him my ex had lied about our daughter being hurt. I told him that was the only reason I had been in that car. I told him I needed to get to her school right now. He didn't ask questions. He just drove. I ran into that school building the second the car stopped. Past the front desk, past the confused receptionist calling after me, straight to the principal's office.
What happened to my daughter? Eric, I got a call that she fell, that she was unresponsive. Where is she?
Mrs. I'm sorry. Erica's in class. Nothing happened. I haven't made any
Send for
calls.
her right now, please.
I pushed the door open and stood there breathing hard with a bandaged shoulder and gravel still in my hair, and I asked him what happened to my daughter. He looked at me like I had walked in from a different planet. Nothing had happened, he said. Erica was fine. There had been no fall, no staircase, no emergency call made to either parent. He hadn't spoken to Maurice at all that day. I made him send for her anyway. I stood in that office and I waited, and I did not sit down because I knew if I sat down something in me was going to give way, and I was not ready for that yet. When Erica walked through that door, I crossed the room and pulled her into me before she could speak. I ran my hands over her arms, her face, the back of her head, checking her the way you check someone when your body hasn't caught up to the news that they're okay. She let me do it. She stood still and let me check every inch of her, and when I finally pulled back, she was looking at me with this expression I recognized, the careful, measured look of a daughter who has learned to read her mother's fear without adding to it. Then her eyes dropped to my shoulder. The bandaging had bled through on one side. Not dramatically, just enough. Just visible enough that there was no explaining it away. She looked up at me. Mom. Her voice was steady in a way that broke something open in my chest. You're bleeding. What happened to you? And just like that, the last wall came down. There is a specific kind of pain that has nothing to do with your body. The nurse was still cleaning my shoulder when Jay walked in. I heard him before I saw him. His voice at the front desk, firm and fast, telling whoever was behind the counter that he was family and he was coming through. And then he was in the doorway and his face. I will never forget his face in that moment. Jay is not a man who shows fear easily. He grew up learning to keep his expression neutral in rooms where showing the wrong emotion could cost you. But when he saw my arm, something moved across his face that he couldn't pull back in time. He crossed the room and stood beside the chair and didn't say anything for a long moment. Just looked at the bandaging, at the bruising already rising along my right side, at the way I was holding my jaw tight to keep from reacting every time the nurse made contact with the wound. Then he said, I'm pressing charges with you. First thing tomorrow. I almost laughed. I already told them I'm pressing charges. Good, he said. And we're moving your stuff out of his place this weekend. That was Jay. No performance. No falling apart in a way that required me to manage his emotions on top of my own. Just, next steps. Here is what we do now. Here is how we move forward. I have always loved him for that. Aunt Myrna called 4 times before I answered. When I finally picked up, she didn't say the words I had been bracing for. The I told you, so that lived in every conversation we'd had about Maurice for the past 2 years. She just said come stay with me. I told her I'd think about it. She told me she was coming to get me herself if I didn't call her back by 8. I believed her. My phone had 11 other missed calls. I didn't look at who they were from. I just let Jay sit beside me while the nurse finished, and I breathed, and I let the room be quiet. For days after the expressway, he came to find me. Not with a phone call. Not through Jay or through anyone connected to what had happened on that road. He simply appeared at the coffee shop 2 blocks from my workplace, already seated at a corner table when I arrived, like he had known which place I would choose before I chose it. He was dressed simply. Dark jacket. No guards visible. Nothing about him that announced what I was beginning to understand he was. He ordered nothing. I sat across from him and wrapped both hands around my cup and waited. He asked how my shoulder was healing. I told him it was fine. He nodded the way someone nods when they already knew the answer and asked out of courtesy rather than curiosity. That small thing, that tiny confirmation that he had already been keeping track, should have unsettled me more than it did. Why did you stop? I asked. On the highway. Why did you pull over? He considered the question the way a man considers something he has already thought through completely. Because I saw what happened. Plenty of people saw. I said. Yes, he replied. And he said nothing else about it. I sat with that answer for a moment and understood that it was both completely true and carefully incomplete. He had seen what happened, and seeing it had triggered something in him that I did not yet have the language to describe. Not outrage. Not impulse. Something more organized than either of those things. I didn't know what to do with him. With the weight of what he had done on that road. With the way he occupied that corner table like the room had quietly rearranged itself to accommodate him without being asked. Gratitude that large feels like debt when you have spent years learning what it costs to owe someone powerful anything at all. He seemed to understand that without me saying it. He didn't press. He didn't remind me of what he had done or position himself as someone I now owed a version of my life to. He asked if I was being looked after. I said yes. He said he was glad. Then he stood, straightened his jacket, and told me he hoped I healed well. He was almost at the door when I said his name for the first time. Huang Dong. He stopped, but didn't turn all the way around. Just enough to show me he was listening. Thank you, I said. I mean it. He stood there for one quiet second. Then he walked out. I stared at my cup and tried to figure out why the most protected I had felt in 2 years had just left the building, and why that fact scared me almost as much as the highway had. This is the moment most people miss. When protection stops feeling like rescue and starts feeling like something else entirely. If this story is hitting different right now, subscribe and tell me in the comments. Would you have trusted him at this point? Or would you have kept your distance? Because what she finds out next about who he really is changes the entire game. I was folding laundry at Myrna's house when the message came through. 2 weeks after the expressway. 14 days of slowly convincing my body that it was allowed to relax. 14 days of Erica watching me from across rooms with that careful expression she had developed somewhere around age 12. The one that meant she was measuring how okay I actually was versus how okay I was claiming to be. 14 days of Maurice sitting in a holding pattern inside the legal system while I waited for the process to move at its own unhurried pace. I had changed my number the day after the hospital. Jay had handled it while I was still getting my shoulder redressed. New number, distributed to exactly 11 people. My supervisor, Myrna, Jay, Erica, a few others I trusted completely. Maurice was not on that list. So when my phone lit up with a message that began, "You think a new number stops me?" I stood in the middle of Myrna's living room with a half-folded shirt in my hands and felt the 14 days of careful recovery dissolve in about 4 seconds. He had the number. I didn't know how. I didn't know who. But he had it. I called Jay first. Not the police, Jay. That probably tells you everything about where my faith in the system was sitting at that moment. Jay picked up on the second ring, and before I finished the sentence he said, "I already heard." I stopped. "What do you mean you already heard?" He was quiet for a second in the way Jay gets quiet when he is choosing his words carefully. Then he said, "Huang Dong knows too. He knew before you called me." I sat down on Myrna's couch. Maurice had been in custody. He had made bail 3 days ago, and nobody had told me in time. And somehow, through whatever network operated invisibly around that man, Huang Dong had already been tracking every move Maurice made since the moment he walked out of that facility. I never asked how. Maurice made bail, and he already had her new number. If that sent a chill through you, you're exactly where this story needs you. Subscribe right now and drop a comment. How did he get that number? Because the answer is darker than you think, and Huang Dong's next move will shock you. A man like Maurice does not use his freedom to lie low. That was never going to be his move. I knew that the moment Jay confirmed the bail. Maurice does not retreat. He repositions. He takes whatever ground he lost and immediately starts calculating how to recover it from a different angle. That is who he is. That is who he has always been. I just spent 2 years mistaking that quality for strength instead of recognizing it for what it actually was. The behavior of a man who cannot tolerate existing in a world where he does not control something. The first thing he did was call Erica, not from his own number, from another unknown number. The same strategy he had used on me outside my workplace, because when something works once, Maurice runs it until it stops working. Erica was in her dorm room when the call came through. She answered because she didn't recognize the number, and college students answer unknown numbers in case it's financial aid. When she heard his voice, she hung up immediately. Then she called me. I want to tell you I was proud of her in that moment, and I was, completely, deeply proud. But underneath the pride was something cold and specific. Because Maurice reaching out to Erica was not about reconnecting with his daughter. Erica was a channel, a pressure point, a way back into my decisions through the one door he knew I could never fully close, my child. Jay flagged it to Huang Dong's people within the hour. I didn't ask Jay how that communication worked or when exactly they had established it. There was a period somewhere in those 2 weeks where Jay and Huang Dong had apparently reached an understanding, the terms of which I was not fully briefed on and chose not to interrogate too deeply. What I knew was this. By the time Maurice tried a second call to Erica the following morning, the number he was using had already been identified, reported, and flagged as a violation of his bail conditions. Maurice had used his freedom in exactly the wrong direction, and the walls were already moving closer. I found out who Huang Dong really was on a Wednesday evening, sitting at Myrna's kitchen table with a cup of tea I hadn't touched. It didn't come from him. It didn't come from Jay, though I later understood Jay had known for at least a week before I did and had been carefully deciding how to tell me. It came from my co-worker Dara, who had a cousin in federal logistics who recognized the name when Jay had apparently mentioned it in passing during a phone call he thought was private. Dara sat across from me in the break room and spoke quietly and watched my face the entire time she talked. By the time she finished, I understood why the coffee shop table had felt like it rearranged itself around him. Why his guards moved without being told twice. Why 2 vehicles had been able to close around Maurice on a live expressway with the kind of coordination that doesn't come from good intentions alone. Why information about Morris's finances had reached the prosecutor's office through channels nobody could trace, but nobody could challenge either. Huang Dong was not a businessman who happened to have security. He ran one of the most quietly powerful Korean crime organizations operating on the eastern seaboard. Not loudly. That was the thing that kept striking me as Dara talked. Nothing about what she described was loud. No headlines. No dramatic arrests. Just an organization that moved like water, finding every crack in every surface and filling it so completely that by the time anyone noticed, the structure had already shifted around it. I drove to his office the next evening and sat in his car park for 11 minutes before I went in. He was not surprised to see me. He never seemed surprised by anything I did, which was either deeply comforting or deeply concerning, depending on the hour. I asked him directly if what I had been told was true. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he said, "Does knowing who I am change what happened on that road?" I didn't answer immediately, because the honest answer was complicated. What he had done on that expressway was real regardless of the organization behind it. But I was not the same woman I had been before Doris sat across from me in that break room. I knew what I was standing close to now, and I hadn't moved away yet. He arranged a safe house without telling me he had arranged it. I found out through Jay, who mentioned it the way you mentioned something you assume the other person already knows, then immediately recognized from my expression that I did not know, and then spent the next 40 seconds backpedaling in the specific way Jay backpedals when he has accidentally handed someone information they weren't supposed to have yet. A secure apartment. Fully staffed. Erica included in the arrangement without condition. Available the moment I said yes. I said no. I want to be honest about why. It was not because I didn't understand the logic of it. It was not because I thought Myrna's house was impenetrable or that Morris's bail conditions would hold him. It was because saying yes meant stepping fully inside something I did not yet have a map for. Maurice had controlled my environment for 2 years, where I went, how I moved, what felt safe, and what didn't. Accepting a safe house from a man whose full world I had only just begun to understand felt like trading one form of managed existence for another. Even if his intentions were completely different, my body did not yet know the difference between being protected and being contained. So I stayed at Myrna's, and I told myself that was a choice I was making from strength. 3 days later, a car I didn't recognize sat at the end of Myrna's street for 2 hours. I noticed it from the upstairs window. Dark-colored, engine off, positioned at the angle Maurice used to park when he was watching rather than approaching. I called Jay. Jay called someone. Within 20 minutes, the car was gone. Not driven away casually, gone, as in removed in a way that suggested whoever had moved it understood exactly why it needed to disappear quickly and quietly. That evening, Huang Dong came to Myrna's front door. He stood on the porch and spoke calmly and told me without embellishment what had been parked at the end of the street and what it meant for the current arrangement. Then he presented one option, the secure location, my terms, Erica included, and waited. He gave me the second, the same way he had given me the second on the highway. This time I didn't stay crouched in the gravel. I said yes. He told me what he had done on a quiet Thursday morning, sitting across from me in the safe house kitchen while Erica was still asleep down the hall. He didn't ease into it. He didn't build toward it or soften the edges. He simply placed both hands flat on the table, looked at me directly, and told me Morris's finances had been examined. Not by the police, by people who knew how to look at the architecture of a man's money and identify every place he had built something he wasn't supposed to build. Two business fronts Maurice had been operating under a separate name for years. Income he had never declared. Transactions connected to people whose own legal situations made association with them a significant liability. All of it had been packaged carefully and delivered to the prosecutor's office through a channel that was untraceable in origin, but completely unimpeachable in content. Additionally, and this was the part that sat heaviest in the room between us, documentation of Morris's pattern of abuse had been compiled. Not just what he did to me on that expressway. A broader record. Other incidents. Other women who had encountered Maurice in context that told a story the highway assault alone could not fully tell. That documentation had also reached the right hands. Maurice was no longer facing a single assault charge. He was facing a case that had expanded so far beyond that Tuesday afternoon that his attorney had already made 2 calls attempting to negotiate terms. There would be no quiet plea, no reduced charge that let him walk out in 18 months and recalibrate. The foundation he had been planning to rebuild on had been removed while he was still drawing up the plans. I sat with that for a long time after he finished talking. Then I asked him why. Not why he had done it. I understood the logic of that. I asked why he had told me. He could have let the legal process move and never said a word, and I would have assumed the prosecutor's office had simply done its job thoroughly. He said, because you deserve to know that someone made a decision on your behalf, and you deserve to decide how you feel about it. I looked at him across that kitchen table, at the complete absence of apology in his expression, at the fact that he had dismantled Morris's entire future with the same controlled precision he had used on that expressway, and had then sat across from me and told me the truth about it, because he thought I had earned the truth. I didn't know whether to be grateful or terrified. Honestly, I was both. You stayed for the rescue. But this is the moment that changes everything. Subscribe, hit the bell, and tell me in the comments, did he go too far? Or did Maurice get exactly what he deserved? The verdict came on a Friday. I wore a gray dress I had bought specifically for that day, not to impress anyone, not for the cameras that sometimes appeared outside courtrooms for cases like this. I wore it because I wanted to walk into that room looking like a woman who had decided something about herself, like someone who had already done the hard work of surviving and was only here now to collect the paperwork. The prosecutor's case was thorough in a way that left Morris's attorney very little room to occupy. The highway assault, the documented pattern, the financial irregularities that reframed Maurice not as a man who had made one terrible decision on an expressway, but as a man who had been making calculated, harmful decisions for years and had simply finally done it where other people could see. Maurice did not look at me once during the reading of the verdict. I noticed that. I sat in that courtroom and I noticed the precise way he kept his eyes forward and slightly downward. Not from remorse. I knew him too well to assign him remorse, but from the specific shame of a man who has been fully seen and can no longer manage the version of himself that other people are now holding. Guilty. The word landed in that courtroom and my body received it in a way I was completely unprepared for. Not relief exactly, something older and more complicated than relief. 2 years of walking carefully. 2 years of managing my expression and protecting Erica from the full weight of what was happening inside our home, and telling myself I was handling it when what I was actually doing was surviving it one day at a time. All of that was in the room with me when that verdict was read. I made it to the courthouse bathroom before the tears came. I stood in a stall with my back against the cold wall, and I let everything I had been holding since that Tuesday afternoon on the expressway finally move through me. Not pretty crying. The kind that comes from somewhere below language. When I walked back out, Jay was leaning against the wall outside the bathroom door. He didn't say anything. He just handed me a bottle of water and stood beside me while I pulled myself back together. Across the street, when I finally pushed through the courthouse doors, a black car was parked at the curb. He didn't get out. He just made sure I saw it. That was enough. I called him on a Sunday. Not because anything was wrong. Not because Maurice had done something or a new threat had appeared or Jay had flagged something that needed handling. I called him on a Sunday morning with a cup of coffee in my hand and the sun coming through the safe house window and Erica asleep down the hall. And the only reason I called was because I wanted to. That distinction matters more than I can explain to you right now. For 2 years, every decision I made had a reason attached to it that belonged to someone else. I left the house at a certain time because of Maurice. I chose my words carefully because of Maurice. I measured my tone, my expression, my movement through my own life because of Maurice. Even after I left, even after I packed Erica's things and got out, the shape of my decisions was still being carved by the space he had occupied. This was the first call I had made in 2 years that belonged entirely to me. He picked up on the second ring. He didn't say he was surprised. He just asked where I was. Not because he didn't know. I understood by then that he likely already knew. He asked because he wanted me to tell him. He wanted the information to come from me voluntarily, on my terms, in my own time. I told him.
Erica picked criminology as her elective.
Of course she did.
Don't.
I didn't say anything you were thinking.
He came over an hour later. No guards at the door. No formal arrangement. Just him, standing in the safe house kitchen while I made a second cup of coffee, and we existed in the same space, without an emergency holding us there for the first time since that expressway. We talked for 3 hours. About nothing urgent. About Erica, who had submitted her spring semester course selections the day before and had chosen an elective in criminology that made us both go quiet for a second before we laughed. About Myrna, who had already informed me through Jay that she expected a full explanation of everything that had happened over the last 2 months delivered in person over a proper meal. About the version of my life that existed on the other side of all of this, the one I had not allowed myself to picture while survival was the primary occupation. He did not tell me he had feelings for me. He did not make a declaration or press for a definition of what we were doing in that kitchen on a Sunday morning. He simply stayed, and I let him. At some point, Erica appeared in the doorway in her pajamas, saw him sitting at the table, and made herself a bowl of cereal with the energy of someone who had already decided her opinion and was not planning to share it immediately. She kissed the top of my head on her way back to her room. At the door, she paused and looked at him once, direct, measured, her grandmother's eyes in her face. Then she nodded, small and clean, and walked away. Myrna called that evening. I picked up on the first ring for the first time in months. She asked how I was. I told her I was okay, and meant it in a way I hadn't meant it in a very long time. She went quiet for a moment. Then she said, she survived it. Not a question. Never a question with her. I survived it. And for the first time since that Tuesday afternoon on the expressway, surviving didn't feel like the end of something. It felt like the beginning. And that, right there, is where her real story starts. If this journey moved you from chapter 1 all the way to here, I need you to subscribe right now and turn on your notifications because the next story is coming. And trust me, it hits even harder than this one. Drop a comment and tell me your single favorite moment from this entire story. Was it the sleeve roll? The verdict? That Sunday morning phone call? And where are you watching from? Drop your location and time. I read every single one. The next story is already waiting for you.